Metodam, you have been saying,
Kimbandi, Sange, Shindo,
Mede Boagi, Droga,
Nanda, Shinla, Shevara, Sho, Guru Rana, Mendeva, Ramneya, Dayami. Oh, that's like that. Oh yeah, that didn't it? That didn't oh, that didn't Chime Nakshan do the land of Miloquabe Dungan, Yayasam, Chime Nakshan dos, who did 60 touch.
So then coming on to the second point of renunciation of renouncing from attachment to future lives. Then we come into these words, the second part of that first paragraph there. The second paragraph. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying.
What the Lende Miloquabe Dungan, Yansan Chime Nakshan dos. Oh, Lende Sandy. Any le Gabasani Tindabu Tiji Yungure. Oh, Teni Tiji Yungure. Oh, le Pig Casa. Oh, ta Lang and Basson Lenabo. Miguel Lesana Tindabu Tungi, Ting Everest. Oh, Luba Yamaras, Luba Chunti, Chigi, Gug Gavasani, David Dungisonsa, Sigmare. Gug Migavasani, David Digichonsa, Sigmare. What is on the Luba Yamaras, or Tata or Jungson.
So by thinking over and again that actions and effects are unbetraying and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So this topic here of karma, the first thing one wants to talk about or think about related to karma is that karma is definite. What this means is that from a good act or a virtuous act, from a positive act, then good will come or virtuous results will come from it, and from a negative act, negative results will come. So that way of karma working, and that you will receive positive results from positive actions, and negative results from negative ones. That's definite to be that way around. It's always going to be in that order.
Oh yeah. Pero shabby na ani saben delia ne tamna negative gigramato temasa gigmare tema tamna tema gigramato ne gigyomare oda kanda odinde dingi ngebara o to saben bigi ngabochi kushusori gas tabina tinde kush gigramato cubu ta tinde gigmare 다 비게 교부 리소리 비게 리마스 다 가서래 먼저 다 가게 되라고 가사 교부 때문에 가 림부 림부 시스템나 데부들 교부 티기그레 마도 티기그야 뭐 세상 예 봤어 어딘데.
So it's very much the example of when you're planting different types of trees and plants to get a different fruit or different flower to come from that. If you plant the seed of a wheat germ, a wheat seed, that's what you get from it. If you plant the seed for an apple tree, then apples is what comes from it, not something else. If you plant the seed of a lemon or lime bush, then that's what comes from it. So in other words, it's not that apples come from a lime seed or the other way around. Certain seeds produce certain results.
Oh yeah, what is? Oh, Lange bus. Bena, any that chilla, Bengabagia, Gushur stop, Chile, Tide, Gubigia, Limbuch stop. Chill cuts of a gay semi station, dig a tata or manoji game or the big David Manobi given or game gurba, Petrium.
So it's simply like if you plant the seed of apple tree, what you get from that is apples. If you plant the seed of a lemon tree, then you get lemons. And if you plant the seed of a chili plant, you get chilies. And so out of all those different three things, it's not that you can get a mixture, that you're going to get chilies from a lemon tree seed or apples from a chili seed. It's fixed the way that those things, results come from the particular causes.
Oh yeah, lenge bas. Ta di jida chilolia. Tas bige sabyon kharita bi ine tin debu de ngebre. Ine ya kyawatas ni kyagu marwa. Bena kushur shitabi na kharik chiktabi yona tele ya ko ngegen chona ko jig marwa. Ope tenangshi ani tima chona ta jigre ko no mare. O tenangshi pe tenangshi ngaranzo bige dewada dungi sa di yoyagi gyu gyabada dipa sayuna. O tin debu de ko luwa yungure ine ya yombe kyagu mare. Majaw karesana. O le bige dungi yoyagi gyu mige sayuna. Dipa sayuna tel shakdong cheta. 비 샤동체 고 가래서나 샤동체는 내가 그 단도 그러고 딘 대부 연구 말 봐. 오 딘데 샤동체비나 딘 대부 동의 연구요 말. 다나시 개와 dob신 전주 셈 서로 봐. 오다 양다 왜 따와 개는 거 잡아내야 말고 니마 싸바 다 살고 딘 대부 연구 말 봐. 오 딘데 제비는 잡아내 연구 말. 고 기가 말고 내가 땅 살아 봐. 에 딘데 미가 봐. 다 개발해지네. 개변 대부 디기 연구래. 고 녀버래. 이나야 켜그 말해. 배 개발사네. 아니 배 고반내바 징이 배 록다로 붙이는 배자반에 매선으로 다 때문에 콩로 시청을 깨스나 개변 대부 디기디 첨보연의 춘주스 망보연의 용료스 딱딱내바 깨기도 와. 어떻게 된대. 켜봐요. 켜그 말해.
So in general, it's definite, therefore, that from a virtuous action you'll get a virtuous result, and from a non-virtuous action, a non-virtuous one. That's fixed in terms of you can only get the particular result from the particular cause. But if you ask, is it necessarily that always going to be that result's going to come about? Then of course it doesn't follow there's always going to be that result, because if you do a non-virtuous action, for example, then you can purify that non-virtuous action with various means of purification, and that the result won't come about. And likewise with virtuous actions, you can do things which will destroy a virtuous action. So, for example, anger. In fact, every moment of anger is said to destroy huge amounts of positive actions. And you can actually completely, it's said that with wrong views, in fact, you completely remove or totally destroy virtuous actions. So, although it's certain that virtue positive comes from virtue and negative comes from non-virtue, it's not certain that there always will be that result from either of them.
Oh yeah, 어떻잖아. 다 디제 랭게 바체. 되니 레 패쳐 봤어. 비게 지난치 대럽지미네 패쳐 버려. 빼나 파 구슈로 있는 구슈선 춘주시답샤나. 딘드우디 베디 첨보유야. 베디 로 망고 대야 대부 망고 진야 그 파들도 춘주시마도 요 말봐 패쳐 봤사티 오칠로이나 지단가 되려 봐. 다 나로 제비네 레 개바사비네 개바 직스마도 사면네 개바 춘주지미네 딘드부텔라 첨보용야 망보용야 디기 망보용야 디기 첨보용야 오다 레 비게 미고봐 춘주사이네 딘데불이야 비게 가서래 첨보용야 망보용야 어디 레 패쳐봤어.
And then the second point, there's 4 points here. The second point to contemplate in terms of karma is that karma increases. And this is analogous to the external example of, for if you put a seed in for an apple tree, the seed itself is only very small. But if you plant that in the ground, the results or the effects that come from that seed will be a whole big tree and many apples and so forth. So the effects are much, much bigger than the actual initial cause. It's much more extensive. The same is true of karma. In other words, if you do a very small virtuous action. It may be very tiny, but in fact the results that can come from that are enormous, and it can be much, much bigger than the actual action that was made. And the same with non-virtue, obviously. A small non-virtuous action can produce enormous results much greater than the actual cause. So karma increases.
어디래 패쳐봐. 먼저 자가난 미게마 뒤떡도 막인스도 자가게는 먼저 벽에를 마멜로도 사야 돼. 진짜 코만서 찍답샤네. 찍답샤. 된 데불이야 안 베트 숨게 쉽게. 제. 베트 샤워 합격해서 바뀌고서. 당문을 타네 다 패쳐봐 여러분. 디리기도 와. 어디 소시 배.
You can see this. There's an example in India of if you plant maize, it's a small seed, and that from that one small seed, then up to hundreds, 2, 3, 4, 500, the shoots will come out of that. So again, this is an example, external example of how from something small, then enormous results come about.
내 배치와 내 마체보다 말해. 내 마체나 기디 가야 마체나 디도 용거 말해. 당연히 시인에 다 가서 내가 마체나 그거 된대요 말아. 내가 다는 마체 그 가서 용해요 말아. 내가 사시고 내가 야로 가리 마체 된대요 말아. 어디나시 아니 비게 파마치 보고 이미네 그 bendamen yung kudwa gasha pe kibuse yung gasha kang sibte te karasan soso ngeme kebangeme lesa ko leg twigin debuti ko da ko luwa mebse yung gu yormado si pe chikbere yung medwa o tindere.
And then from certain karmas, and the third point here is that that how to say and that the karma you haven't created, you don't get a result from. So in other words, the results, if you've created the karma of something, it will come about. But if you haven't created the karma, then the results of that karma won't arise. So the example being children born to a parent, some children born are very helpful and behave well and so forth, and some don't. And that's not necessarily always to do with the parent, but that's something to do with the karma of the child. So from the parent's point of view, the karma to have a well-behaved child or a not well-behaved child is depends upon whether if you've not created the karma to have a well-behaved child, then as much as you do to try and create that, it doesn't come about. So in other words, you don't experience the results of karma you haven't created.
뭐야 어떠잖아. 되는 제법 취임에 써봤어. 내 전에 취임에 써봤어. 다 내가 다가라 연구를 송. 다다디 지난 시작동 도에 있는 시작동 맞아봐. 개발 있는 다 컨트롤 맞좀 봐. 뒤에 있는 거 딱다 연구. 다 연구 얘기 제비는 얘기요 말봐. 저 취임에 써봤어. 연구요 말. 다 취임에 써봤어디 원 얘기 마태베 계절에. 얘기 마태 따라고 연구를 마도 버루들 And then the last point of these four is that karma never becomes exhausted. It's always going to be there. It's always going to bring about a result. Until it's actually brought about its result, then it will always be certain to produce a result at some time. The only exceptions, of course, is, as we said before, that if it's a positive karma, it can be destroyed by anger or by wrong view. And if it's a negative karma, then it can be purified. But other than that, karma will definitely produce a result at some point. 어디제 다 디체자 랜데 밀로 코베도 랜데 산디 아니 시딱 랭게와 레페체와 레마체 마레 레마체메도 제바 추면서 시난데 다 랭 주도 건가 dwind고요. 그래서 개바체나 안디나 람드나 세버요와 오 신다나 세버요. 다 네들이 망고슈 뭐체.
So here we're talking about actions and their effects, or karma. The first thing, the basis of understanding karma is to understand those 4 points, that karma is definite, that karma increases, that one won't experience the results of karma you haven't created, and that that karma doesn't become exhausted until it's actually arisen. So those 4 points are the basis of understanding karma, but of course the whole subject of karma is much more complicated than that, and there's a lot more to it. But all that presentation you can find in Lamrim text. We don't have time to go into all that now, but you should read more extensively in Lamrim text about all the different other aspects of karma.
다 somebody 인중 깨베 차대 그래서 대다 공배 거의 편조를 이미 깨지다 미시 인제군도 다바 등을 주나 대등 인중 깨발라스 도시.
And then the next point in here, renunciation, is the definition of having generated renunciation, or the mark of having generated it. As it says here in the text, when by having trained in that way, there is no arising even for a second of attraction to the perfections of cyclic existence, and all day and night the intention of seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated.
뭐야? 어다 단다 관리시아바 난신기 아니 코베견 강에다 대소 거리거리 힘은에 상당히 딘데 관발된 대달 관배스 딘데 곰니 다 곰니 관바스도 좀 받아 배 섬을 관자태인데 아니 코베 편조라 코바스비에 날다 지 시베 대바다 지 남한테 열때 코베 편조 컨디션이 이미게션 이미스도 좀 딘데 중나 삼바 나 딘데 중나 삼베게 라바짜비아 줘봐 오키짜네 매바 미기싱스 기타미지 딱 가르기 그래서는 인생군도스다 인생군도스다 그뒤 있네 님은 생이 있네 딱 인생이마도 샤야 말봐 어다 그뒤 있네 타바시 통나서 딘데 그로 띵 낭만 슉슉이 그 띵기비 게용고도나 게비나 니중 게버스 니중 게버세 되서.
So again, the meaning here is that what one needs to do is contemplate again and again what we've been talking about, particularly the faults of cyclic existence. Here, when we're saying contemplate or meditate, if you like, using that word there, what it's really meaning is familiarizing yourself with this concept. The word in Tibetan particularly means familiar for meditation. It means familiarizing yourself, and this is what you want to be doing here in terms of the understanding of the faults of samsara, is becoming more and more familiar by contemplating these again and again. And when you've done that for a while, you'll get to the point when you do get to the point whereby the wish for samsara, whereby the craving towards samsara doesn't arise for even a second, or more accurately in the Tibetan it says that the more it doesn't arise either night or day, and that even there's only the two parts, night or day, right? And if you don't have the feeling either night or day, wishing for samsara, or as we say in the English here, not even for a second, when you've attained that, when you've become so familiar that you never have the wish, or you never crave for samsara, then that's the mark of having generated renunciation.
다간다 니종 배점만 많이 봐. 즉 고문 되면 그뒤 있네 고 된댔다. 타로도 그선 배 간다. 화발 타로 그선 때 니종디 어다 된데 좀 많이 받겠나? 니종다 타바 되니 있겠나? 딱 간다. 런이지고 비게 땡게다바 타고 그선 어다 화발 타고 그선 딘데스. 런이지고 상당히나 팀이 그러면 쇼버래. 대만이 받체 어다 란다 다베 비게 섬제 강가에 란다바 과배 난 동인 양게 요래 제가 들려 미스베 잡았게니 제베 안에 애니 비게 타바 통일로게나 어떻게 쳔별 라면 쇼고 딱 가다 라면 쇼고래 니조 삼바 좀 많이 깨나 또잖아.
And now the important thing about having actually obtained or realized renunciation in one's mind is that basically you'll enter a path. You'll enter the path which leads to. So if we talk about the lower vehicle path or the higher vehicle path, if you've generated this thought of renunciation for yourself alone, but you've spontaneously had the realization of renunciation, you enter what we call the lower vehicle path. If you've combined that with not only a renunciation for yourself, but understanding that all other living beings as well have those same sufferings of samsara, and you generate that thought of renunciation not just for yourself, but for everyone, for all living beings, then that's the mark of having entered the Mahayana path.
뭐야? 어디지? 다디니 다디 면제라. 니종做不起. 다디니 니버디 어디라 봐. 전주섬으로 봐. chanju sem de xie ge ni ba chanju sem xie de la ya chanju sem ge wa ya gyum zen chanju sem ge be top ta ge be che ke sung men du de na ge be top ge be che yo de ba da
这有嘛了？
che sung men du da de na chanju sem ge be chanju sem ge ta sung da de sa ro
So again, so we come into the second of these three principles, and again it's divided. Rinpoche is saying here it's divided into two. In our text, we've divided into three, but Rinpoche is saying that probably that third one isn't really correct. So the three things are firstly the purpose, the reason for generating the mind of enlightenment, as we did with renunciation. Then the method, how to generate the mind of enlightenment, and then we do have in our text the definition of having generated that, but as I say, Rinpoche says that's probably not correct. Oh, is it? Is it? Oh, really? Because
ge be che
Che bizze di là nel pongre bisogna che non lo yore sa.
on ga xie le ge ta tan de do ne ha ju xian de ge le 中年这个人，他过就去叫的，干了有的我的就想能大大的这个。我呀，他爱了的学会的，他离那了，对这个呢，现在没东，我这下去了，我的，他那我得个买，我这为这个晓得吧？的下去，但是你这把的这下的嘛，都现在要嘛的。
So obviously, Rinpoche is doing it from the point of view of the root text, and from that point of view, we don't have these headings in there, but the headings have been probably inserted, the ones we have here, later on.
我呀，我对，他的学会的，他的呢，就是个结果被竞争的了，那是，你说的啊，那么大生意机，上班买那拉面上去个，平时单位就那么有，乱点那么个上去什么叫 gas， 我的，对的，结果被竞争的是。
And then, so the first one, the purpose or the reason for generating bodhicitta, says even if renunciation has been developed, if it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment, it does not become the cause for the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment.
我呀，我家长，他你中的些人也不来，因为你就几乎这个嘛的是，你中的他让你别跨越东西的，刚开始呢，他的他无什么你就是吧，让你是吧。 이 지고 되거든 되게 말했어. 그래서는 전주섬 격구래 니중. 그래서는 다 니중 산디 뭐라니 과배 동을 따네. 텔레타베 비게 탐되게 돼 니중체. 다 디면서 전주섬 와라 니중의 파카 현다를 팔로. 그래서는 샘제 현다 은행비게 대바 동에 만동에 찍고 임바질이야. 아니 대바 두다 면신 동해 봉다 면신 대왕의 공원에 전에다 동해 배 거뒤에 동해 양 타 밑에버체 딘데요 제단 섬진 되게 말한도 과배나 대외 내가라 대바 전부 쉬우세 대바 과배나래야 망치의 편도 다 패지 편도를 전에 편도 가지 고주고구체요 내밖에 가지 찍지마도 요마 어디서 인자 편도 차는 셰비나 편도 침부는 내가 맹게 말해. 과배 나래. 당어도 비게 상계 고방서 토지 터도 상계 고방이야, 여러분. 어디 토발라야 닝지 전부도做了, 전부다 닝지. 되게 발라 동에 나인지 섬전 미고로 마도 고 기토야 말와. 제자 미고 섬전의 명니 라 비게 탐제 김에 고방 토비한디 어 섬전의 명니 기고요. 비게 그 랑고 차네 제비나 어디세 한가조대 퍼진 조사 단데디 다 진소 퍼진 조대 섬체는 소 집에 당서면은 용마르바 수름 송서고 서바 공서고 대소 간가 섬체는 미고르 봐 랑고 내가 잖아 제가 섬체기 대화 매워 대화 첨부 이어받아 아니 람피게 상계 고바 톱저 터도 토발래 되게 매는 미로래 어디 손자 거딘 집에 고네 뒤체니 닝지 첨부 겨우래스
So in terms of what's the purpose for generating bodhicitta or the mind of enlightenment, in general, of course, just having renunciation or generating the mind of renunciation is an amazing thing to do, and it's certainly very worthwhile and incredible to achieve that mind of renunciation. But it's limited from the point of view that it's really looking just at yourself, if you're looking just at yourself in terms of renunciation. It doesn't have the extensive way of thinking which includes all other living beings as well. So when you expand the mind out and think not just of yourself, but you think of all living beings, and you apply the same principles you did to yourself in terms of why you should be renounced from samsara to others, then exactly the same thing applies. Just as you want to be happy and don't want to suffer, others are the same. And just although they want to be happy and don't want to suffer, they don't know very well how to do that, how to achieve happiness and how to remove suffering. They don't know the methods very well to do that. And we're related to all these others. It's not that we exist in isolation. We are related to all others. And in general, although there are people who do harm us and cause us harm in our lives, on the whole, you'll find that the majority of people actually are beneficial to you and that they help us and they are positive to our lives. We need other people in our lives. So when you extend this concept of renunciation and the suffering of samsara and the wish to be free of it to all others, recognizing that they're undergoing the same enormous amount of suffering in samsara that we are, then you start to change from just renunciation for yourself to this mind of bodhicitta. And of course, it's not just that we rely on others, it's just not just that others benefit us in so many ways, from a worldly point of view, but also from a spiritual point of view. Most of all the things that we accomplish along the path, you can't generate love and compassion in your mind unless there are objects, there are people towards whom you can generate that mind. You can't practice the six perfections, for example, without there being other people to practice them on. You can't be generous if there's no one to be generous to. You can't be moral unless there's someone not to harm. And you can't be patient towards generate patience unless there's someone to be patient. So again, all of these factors along the path that we need to generate that lead to Buddhahood all depend upon other people like that.
Ouais, on déta. Ils ont nanda sing stemba la pense de dire. Sont droit, ils ont jigo qui te ma, ils ont nanda semgi. Bige. Oh ranchigu tanda sam sempe jagen migbata number kang thone pa jagen shen ming bige shen dong na misube o dinde ji gi sempa jajan ba ke oras gusu to bod ma chebche dinde ji ma chebi na semge gi ma sina an punzo debe gyuru mi ta punzo choba ranga ten punzo choba shen ge de so sangye go ba de du ma to ku ma res gyuru mi gibe ti gyuru ma sangye go ba to ba ya ma re 제자 런던에 위쳐 주섬저기스 로드인데 봐. 뭐네 타네 전다 첨부 제통이 당근 밀류린지디 톱네. 답에 시중문 톱저도 톱 등에 와다 되지. 전주섬도 전주도 쌤게 오랬어. 라지고 전다 삼마다 배 같이서 당선.
So again, the difference here between just having renunciation for oneself and having the mind of bodhicitta is that instead of the mind being sort of narrow and restricted in a way, one's expanding the view of the mind, one's expanding one's view to encompass all living beings, not just yourself, but all other living beings, understanding that they're all in the same position, and that they're all suffering within samsara, that they all wish to be free of that suffering. So expanding the mind out like that is immediately beneficial. And it says here that the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Why? Because if we're talking about actual Buddhahood here, not just becoming liberated, but reaching the state of full enlightenment or Buddhahood, it depends completely upon this mind of bodhicitta. It depends upon generating bodhicitta and then going through the actions and so forth of a bodhisattva. Buddhahood can't arise without that. So therefore it's said here that the wise, in other words, people who wish for this highest attainment of Buddhahood, then they generate this mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta.
뭐야, 어떻게? 다 전주 쌤사 개발랑엘이야. 그뒤 교들래야. 아니, 이용 참바다. 저번 인지 전부 생인데 군인 고요래. 이용 참바 사대. 쌤지 대화된 된도기 오쌤 대화된 된도들 이용 참바스 참바 참바스 이봉 참바스 이봉 산디 빼나 랑 부구배 이동 마치 부구배 차 탐전 이동 야구 12회나 다 이동 와서 그러고 배 야구 통해 공원에 자네 통구에나 어디 대능신 현代민이 코딘데 비게 통해ቋ네 대충나 이봉 참바스 다 빼르잖아 이봉 참바 어딘데스 참바 비게 까보지 않대.
So the two immediate causes then for generating bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, are great compassion and loving kindness. Now, in terms of the first of those, or the first cause, which is loving kindness, which then leads to compassion, what's the meaning of that? Basically, it's generating this mind of loving kindness towards all others. So, it's if you imagine the sort of mind you have towards your only child, if you've got an only child, or if you have a child, that the mind you have towards that child sees good in that child, sees that child in a very pleasant way, and feels close to that child. If you then take that same feeling of which we call loving kindness, which is looking towards your child in that way, and apply it to everybody, to all living beings, the same feeling of loving kindness, then that's what you're doing in the cause to generating bodhicitta. You're applying the same love you have towards your child to all other living beings. In other words, wishing them to be happy.
That's all. This one. Oh yeah, what is it? You won't chamba. Oh yeah. That's it. What did it? That you won't chamba the yuna. I'm the one you know. Semjin dizu gyuli ya ngone tane khasore sangme debasa deba yuwa mewa tenge debasa phase sha ni tinde ta phase sha ni sakje debaso khobe debadala sakje debasa khobe debade nyungnyung pheji meba로 오 tinde de sha 제장 제장다 되게 khasore ta dewa mebe kanla 동이 비게 끝나네. 동이 비게 된데 간다다 비게 가서 예비 인사 동이들이 텐데게 잡아들 잡아니 치면서 동이 나와 미스베 잡아줘 미스바. 어떠시나?
So if you can generate that feeling of loving kindness towards everybody, towards all living beings, then naturally as a result of that, the next cause of bodhicitta, which is great compassion, will come about. Because if you feel that way towards all living beings, if you feel that sense of closeness or that sense of pleasantness towards all living beings, then naturally you won't want them to suffer. You won't want them to experience if you look at the suffering within samsara, all suffering within, or happiness even within samsara, we describe as being contaminated happiness, and that it's never proper, it's never real, it's never true happiness. So when you see that, and when you have that sense of loving kindness towards all other living beings, naturally from that will come the sense, well, if they're suffering, I don't want them to suffer. You don't want those people that you feel so close to and to suffer. So from loving kindness will naturally arise this mind of great compassion.
뭐야, 언제지? 미스베 잡아 동에 나와 미스베 잡았어. 배나 부구배대 이동와 랑게배 부구배 이동 원내 타네 야고 쉬위 여바체 네 추로질 사나 냐가지고 쉬나 군도나 아니 베게 가서래 다디 파마디 샤지 남주 이동와 통고요래 참바요래 대선자 그 동에 나와면서 디디션 밤에 매점 놀아 처음에 배야 떠야 배 동이 베게 나와면서 배 잡아 배 시비지기 배 대선자 동이를 잡아야 지 밤에 총으로 어디 능신 어 베게 섬제 동에 나와면서 배딱배 간다 동이를 좀더 지기 열어 섬제로 어디를 잡아니 좀 스타트 베르슈나 된데스면로.
So an example of that type of mind is that if for example, if parents who love their child dearly, who see the child, the good things in the child, and are very close to their own child, if that child falls into a running river, falls into water and is at risk of drowning, then clearly because of that loving kindness they have towards their child, the parents will jump straight into the river to rescue the child. They won't think twice about that. They'll jump straight in. So the same thing again applies. If you have that sense of loving kindness, then immediately you'll not want any other living being to experience any suffering. The same way that you wouldn't want your own child to experience suffering.
Well, on this, 다 자잔 자반 인지 전부 생이디 아니 비게 가소래. 전주섬 기야 그 중부서 전주섬사 디네 깨고요. 자반 인지 전부 때네 깨고요래. 그래서나 비게 가서 심지 동에 나와 미세네. 아니 비게 세베티 아니 비게 다 디게 된다라야. 랑 비게 네버 구글 봐. 제가 랑 정보 산계 고방 도고 산계 고방 톱나 따인데 네버 위에 봐. 어디다 대수 셔봐 채네. 뒤오 배 딱지 채네 셔봐 채네. 비게 도구도산 탐자식으로 봐. 어 내려 전주섬 쓰그래. 제가 전주섬 눈번인데 쓰도 봐. 저도 저와 니 전부도면은 전주섬 깨하고 아마 규야만.
And so, if one is able to then have that feeling or that emotion of great compassion towards all others, then again, naturally from that will follow on the thought, well, that these beings, these other living beings that I have this compassion, loving kindness and compassion towards, they're undergoing all these sufferings. They're stuck in samsara. Can I do anything about that at the moment? Am I able to actually help them or be able to free them from samsara? And you'll see that really, at the moment, you don't actually have that potential very much to be able to do much to be living beings. And so from this feeling of great compassion will come the understanding, well, who does have the ability to really help others and really lead them out of samsara into true happiness? Then you understand that it's only the Buddha that really has that capacity. And when you understand that, then again, naturally, the feeling will arise, well, there's no choice. There's nothing else I can do but to become enlightened, become a Buddha, because that's the only way I'll have the potential to actually really help these living beings. So, again, this is a cause and effect relationship. In that you have these feelings of great compassion. You can't, in fact, have bodhicitta without having this feeling of great compassion. And Vijay was saying yesterday as well, when we're talking about bodhicitta, we're talking about something which has two aspects to it. And the aspect of wanting to become enlightened, but also the aspect of why do you want to become enlightened? To help others. So you've got two things there. You've got your own personal enlightenment, and why you're getting enlightened? For the purpose of others.
Oh yeah. 제가 다자번이 전부 제가 왔다 전주성 교통부래 제가 자번이 전부디 토다 파송도 개체가 있어 토마르 개체바디 전주성 베게 좀 특별 첨부래 사종 특징 간사 특별 첨부 남아 숙중게디 토마 가레스 그래서는 자번이 전부서 제가 토마 고 개체부래 토마 개체 사면다고 써도
So we can say about this mind of great compassion that it's important in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Why is it important at the beginning? Because it's like a seed. Why is it like a seed? Because in terms of generating the Mahayana path in our minds, of entering the Mahayana path, it's the main cause which leads to being on the Mahayana path. Once you have great compassion, bodhicitta arises from that, and once you achieve bodhicitta, that's the mark of being on the Mahayana path. So it's said to be important in the beginning because it's like a seed in that way.
Oh yeah, 토마 개주세. 되니 제가 니지 전부디 바로 개심 버렸어. 바로 가려서나 샘게 차네. 아니 전주선버스 그러봐. 전주선배 간에 개심 버려. 그래서나 개색 줘봐. 다 퍼진 줄로서 봐. 개색 줘봐 상부 제한디. 비 심전 비 판바천 줘봐 상부 제한디. 제가 니지 전부 쇠가 송장 바로 개쳐봐.
And why do we say it's important in the middle? Because once you've entered the Mahayana path, once you've become a bodhisattva, then all the actions that you do for the benefit of others, including the six perfections and all the other bodhisattva actions that you'd carry out in order to help others, are done from this motivation or this root of great compassion. So everything you do as a bodhisattva is fueled by this mind of great compassion. So therefore it's said to be important in the middle as well.
뭐야, 언제지? 바로 개쳐봐. 바로 개쳐봐. 출루도 나와쳐 그래. 먼저 배나 다 가리네. 그 로도로 시간에 답이. 내가 당보도 사변도 개쳐 봐. 사변면 거기와 말로 당문에. 사변 지고 기그래서 기그 말을 버루들 추도 류도 되고도 와. 어디 개쳐 봐. 어디 나시 버루들이야. 전주선 비게 가서래. 계속 접어서 못이게 전에 고 비게 상계 고방 토발래야. 데부디 용할래야. 버루를 출lun다be 전주선데 백해치 모르서 전주선 마스터 가서 잡은 인지 좀
And the sort of analogy of it being important in the middle, just as in the beginning it's like a seed, in the middle it's like the manure and the water that's used to grow a plant. So obviously when you're growing something, just planting the seed in the ground is not enough. It needs to have the conditions, the water and the soil and the sunlight and so forth for the plant to grow. Analogous to that, the great compassion in the middle, when one is a bodhisattva when one follows the Mahayana path, all the great beneficial actions of a bodhisattva come about due to this great compassion. So it's in the middle. It's important for that reason.
Oh yeah, 바로 개침세. 타마르 개쳐봐. 타마르 개쳐봐. 두면 받다 봤어. 다 지나 로도르 진다 이미나. 토마스 아비온도 데 출루제 타마르 가르선 데우민 다 롱제야 봐. 고 롱제야. 어디는시 자번이지 전부 돼야 토마 개쳐버래. 고 비게 오 디진 라면 주니야. 그 선주선 개중이 고란해 돼요. 버루들에 개쳐봐. 오늘 다 개서그 줘봐. 비게 어다 초사 디병서 뭐 오늘 같이 오고 데 제도요. 제주. 타마르 개쳐봐데 산개 차네. 아니 뭐네 다네 가서래. 등에 봐자죠. 동이 교체 강아 빵차니 상계기 MB기 배 가서다 등이 탈침서 간다. 달래가 빵야 매봐. 대바인 들라가 톱야 매봐. 톱자. 디 제니 톱니 엔스템지기 되는데 셈지 강을 컨듀기. 비게 가서다 꾸치버 팀부만 고 셈지를 가서 비게 칸도 매봐 참바 배 셈지기 NB기 된다는 게 여봐. 된다나 중이데 가려서나 세베스 그리고 상계 세와면은 차례는 말봐. 다른 돈다 줍잖아. 얘들은 이제 육샤이니 그러 봐. 딘데만 매체 오다 셈지 동나면서 세바디 아니 비게 셈지가 되나니. 베트 난가 다 비게 코바마동 봐도 셈지가 되나 는거요. 오나야디 세바니 지심서 그래.
And then again at the end, it is why is great compassion important. This is like the analogy of if you're growing a tree or growing a plant, and then the fruit of the plant actually arises. When you have the fruit of the plant and you enjoy the fruit of the plant, that's similar to great compassion at the end. Why is it important? What does it mean by being important at the end? When we say the end, what we're talking about? We're talking about when we become fully enlightened, when we become a Buddha. So a Buddha is said to have achieved the two purposes of removed all negativities, removed all afflictions, and the seeds of those afflictions, and accomplished everything that needs to be accomplished. So once one is a Buddha, then in contrast to just being an arhat or just being liberated, you don't just leave it there. You don't just achieve your own aim and then that'll do. For a Buddha, the whole purpose of being a Buddha is to benefit others, is to lead others into happiness and lead them out of suffering. And the root of doing that, of a Buddha performing the actions of a Buddha, which is continually just to benefit others, is great compassion again. So at the end again, great compassion is important.
왜 어디지? 저도 저번이지 전부 산디 공무원 다니다 개침벌에 다 단다디 비게 현대 샘지 현다고 전시벌에 다 숙지는 거 탁을 어디 영화데 저번 니지 전부 숙지 좀 왕게 근데 연구 다나시 아니 비게 전주선 바 사람 떠봤어요. 가신 조금 상게 돈이 가시 가래 거 대줘라 디 가래선 저번이 좀 숙지 중기 숙 잘려게 되네 아니 어딘데 다다는 안도 데리 가사 상계 산에 비게 지난 상계 간거 찍바리 캔슬 뉴스 냠바리 디네 비게 파고전에서도 보이나 비게 닝지랑 수스페트 현대 면작 다 잡아 닝지 첨부티 야우시 비게 원에 대송자 상제 탐지 닝시 정수 안 비게 대송인자 현대 면작 어다 비게 대ጽ기 여봐 당연한 시 기준점아 비 상계 때문에 틀리랑 소식 원에 타는 비 뒤제 타는 그 쉽지 당원에 타는 현대 면작지도 없고 딩이 몰라 저거 김자가서 잡아 닝지 첨부서 고 상마에 원에 샤우지다 현대 면작다 잡아 인자 디샤브
So generally, you can say that the benefit that a person is to others, how much a person is able to benefit others, depends upon the extent of compassion they have, particularly this great compassion. The more great compassion you have in your mind, the more beneficial you are to others. The less great compassion you have, the less beneficial it is. It depends then upon that root of compassion. And then as far as becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha is concerned, there's different speeds that people become enlightened. Some become enlightened very quickly, and some take time. And what's the difference there? The difference is that if someone is able to become enlightened very quickly, they've got more great compassion, or their great compassion is stronger, and that enables them to be enlightened more quickly. Whereas someone who takes more time has been slower to develop their great compassion. And even from the point of view of a Buddha, generally we say Buddhas all have the same qualities. They all have the abandonments and the wisdom and the activities of a Buddha. We say they're the same; they're equal in all that way. But nonetheless, we differentiate a little bit between Buddhas, and so we talk about, for example, Chenrezig as being the Buddha of compassion, and we talk about Tara as being the Buddha of enlightened activities, and we particularly talk about those two, and we focus on Chenrezig and Tara a lot, because although there's no difference between them, because of the way they became enlightened, because of their aspirations and the path that took them to enlightenment, they particularly focused on compassion and love. That was particularly their thing, even more than others. And so when they did become Buddhas, we look at them, or we see them in this aspect of being representative of great compassion and great enlightened activity.
Oh yeah, 되잖아. 이제 당기와 저주스님 계획 탑티. 다대마딩 슈라 추부시 균긴 도가래기 정화 탐배다 당지자게 왜 보수 머리 매막진 꾸네 무미 세바기 신께바로 동의송 기준에 매반나 내가 된다 교회 만남기 간주스는 심적게 버런저스 다들 쇼로가 니도아 다디베데 람주베 틈 많이 말해 람린도 되게 송야만 심믹스 쉽지 뭐는 다네 지준자 매양
So then we get on to the how to generate, or the method to generate the mind of enlightenment. And it says, swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Now, in particular, these two verses telling about the method to develop bodhicitta are quite unique to this text. This way of presenting the method to generate bodhicitta and the basis on which to generate bodhicitta is really a very special quality of this text here, of Lama Tsongkhapa's text, which you really don't find in other Lamrim texts.
Oh yeah, 다디 그 당부디 슈가 추부시 경기 캐르 사이도아 지단 라네 저베 찍버려봐 과바베 선신다 뭐네 타네 니게 컨데스나 슈다 추부시 균케르스 다 추부시디 비게 맞아 커두잖아 깨가나지 않아 고대요 야가 깨가나지 심지디게 과베 심진 디게 컨데저레서나 용도 아니 비게 빼나 추슈 차고 시딘데 교나 디나리야 다 가리네고 어다 디난시 산디 베 kunno be rawana kunno chushu cheda chen kunno ba o tinangshi rawa me bal ya 아니 먼저 샘진 되게 아니 비게 가서나 당부 오 당부 깨버려 오 비게 가서 라와매 봐 과배 날게 라와매 봐오 깨비 동네스로 깨봤지 되네 깨봤지 되네 다 겐도 그래 대 라와 켜내야 맞다 오늘 다네 깨사도 좀 되네 그는 겐고 차도 견 단도 부르신 선도 겐고 차 파되네 겐고 차용도 큰 가야 매봐 그 라와 매봐 개베 동이 개바체 이디하 오도와 개바다 오르바케 안서 냐마 로춘주가 개베 빠르지다 단대 빠르다 뜻대다 오증에만 딘데스 더 춘진에다 딘데 차도서 가서 단다 나 딘데지 통용이야 너도 단데 비게 다 가서 데데다 여러분 수세 아자지미 답이 빈에다 배워라단 빈레는 빠르직 아자 고란데 로도 시라만데 딘데 경고잖아 뭐샤용 그러면도 다서 뭐는 자네 근데지다 뭐 딘데지 저장 경고찬 딘데 윤도로와
So it says here, swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers. There are different interpretations as to what the four powerful rivers means, but the most common or the easiest way to apply this analogy, the four powerful rivers, is to the four sufferings which we experience as a human, of birth, sickness, old age, and death. So if you apply that, then the point is here that this applies to all living beings, and that we're born, we get old, we get sick, and we die. Those are the four sufferings that we undergo. And it's not that we undergo them sort of through choice. It's completely out of our power. It's like being thrown into a river, a very fast-flowing river, and unable to get out. You're bound by the river. There's nothing you can do about it. You're just being swept along by the river. In a similar way, we're without choice, without our freedom, without the freedom to choose. We're being born again and again. We're growing old again and again. We're getting sick again and again, and dying again and again. So we have the sufferings of birth, and we have the sufferings of getting old, and we should all, or we mostly should start to recognise the sufferings of getting old and how that occurs to all of us. You just have to look at a photograph of yourself when you were young, and then compare it to how you are now, and then it's very clear that what aging is doing. Rinpoche one time was staying with a Tibetan woman in Switzerland, and the woman wasn't particularly old, but in the place where he was staying there was a picture of a young lady or a girl in the room, and the picture was actually of the Tibetan woman, but because the age was so different, Rinpoche had no idea who the picture was, but in fact the picture was of this same woman when she was younger. So that's what age does.
Well, I think that gave us that gave a keg issues. Kaleko, Gandor, Gandor Mando, Diri, the Shambache, you Marco, and yet the sun you port or charging, but can go to such time. Munetane, the Nichagumaro Mando, Munetane, Kokale gets an hour, Marwa. But in the party of the Hagudwa, partner, Tongdua.
So it's very fortunate actually that aging happens slowly, or appears to. We don't we don't notice it immediately, because it's not like we go to sleep one night and the next morning we wake up and we're old. But it's just as well, because if it did do that, it would be terrifying. So it's fortunate in a way that it happens gradually over your life. But again, if you look at the pictures from when you were young and now, then it's very clear that it is happening.
어디 있다? 개바티. 라완촌에 야마다. 어디 개베 동이체 다 개베 추샤네. 들고 라완 봐. 민기 추다잖아. 다 개바치. 되는 나와. 다 네가 라마잖아 야마다. 개야래 토마 나데 끼기. 당문에 단 띵지다 딘데 동이는 알 교육 보고 끼긴데 들라베 여봐. 미란 끼기 스페신다 두면서. 딘데 매봐. 개에 거기만 게 나와면 봐. 찍찍. 디네 개인도에 대해 나와면 봐. 큐네. 맞견 디네 데버 이렇게 계기면 다 스페트인데 셴바 되기 인사데 켜내야만 다 라마메바 견도지 다 나바래 나바데 맞견 나기면 사면 딱 간다 수부디 여차도 나용으로 봐 나에다 라마메바 나저데 디나기면 사면도 하고 민두신도 고 나야 가래 나로에 되디야 말이야 된대체 나외 동인체
So again, the important thing about this is this all happens uncontrollably. It's not like we have a choice about these things. It's beyond our control that we get born again and again and suffer from the sufferings of birth. It's beyond our control that we grow old. It's not that we can sort of say, no, I think I won't bother getting old. We have to get old. It's going to happen. We have no choice about it. And the same applies to being sick. Without our having any control over it whatsoever, we become sick again and again. And we may wish, and we do wish very strongly not to be sick and not to become sick, but that's beyond our control. We become uncontrollably sick again and again. So the third one there is being sick.
나차디 잠바 아니 그 만도 강가치고도 상인 되버스는 되게 많다. 고 산돼야 견 사초가 많다. 삼하죠. 삼만든 게딱 응원에 따는 맨들이 삼만도 사고다. 만두신. 나다디 디세만 가서 남규이나 수고 급수가 있잖아. 급수 아스스로다. 나자도 답시야마. 딱 갑자기 하루씩 갑이야 다시. 견에 단도 저게 나기여도 같이 한번 서서다. 견 도착났어. 휴대 땡큐들라고. 땡큐. 어디 다 진짜 잡다.
So again, when we're sick, then there's all the difficulties that go with being sick, all the problem, uncontrollably we become sick again and again. And when we are sick, you can't enjoy the things that you usually enjoy. You don't enjoy the food that you normally enjoy. You don't have a wish to eat food. And you have to eat things you don't want to eat, which is the medicines that you need to eat. And when you're really sick, if you're not sick at all, then if someone came up to you with a needle and wanted to inject you, you would in no way let them near you with a needle. But when you're sick and you know that injection is going to help you, then you say, yeah, please bring the needle and thank you for injecting me with the needle. So that's the difference when you're sick like that.
어딘지 어떤도 샤주사도 항상요. 미수고 그러베 샤다 견 더베트 샤로. 나저직 매버스와 탄다래. 그때때야시도 수고 그래 샤네. 수고 신다 넣겠었다. 어딘지 제가 대수단 되고 아마 데이터도 연구도가 맞지 않잖아요.
And the same with when you're really sick that you undergo what would, if you were healthy would be horrific things like an operation where your body's being cut open or bits of your body are being cut out. Something obviously if you were well and healthy you wouldn't dream of doing, but when you're sick and you need to do it, then you do. You have to undergo those sorts of things.
뭐야? 어떻게 어깨와 가와 나와지 라와 내가 다 맞지를 안 되다. 나와지 안다 치워요. 대시고 베게 민두신도 세대 도안로 친구야. 이게 다 제가 나지 되게 라와 매와 연구 연사 샘제다 연소 연구요. 어디 손자 주라 휴식 기르스 대체
And then the last of the four is that we have to die. And again, not in our control, completely beyond our control. All of us, at some stage, are going to have to die. All of us are going to face death. So, all of these four things, that being bound by these four things, or being swept away by the current of these four powerful rivers, refers to this birth, aging, sickness, and death. And this happens uncontrollably, beyond our control.
어떤데 상당 다디제. 되네 다디월 너가 레기 치마 담배 담스 심지 되게 너가 봐 레사도 잠바 아니 동이 건다 맨다 연구 상계다 너가 상계다 전주 선부터 세배 잡아 쉬지 어디 뭐네 차네다 잡아 니지 전부요 너버요디 심지게 레게 소소지 비게 다 레게 고디 거기서 레가 남밤이 바디 용도 잠바 또 써야 야마 상계다 전주 선부터 자반이제 전부 요르카신 지야요 맞다 너가봐 배 치답면 너가봐 레기 치마 담배 담고 심지게 레사도 삼았던 어떤이디 미드신의 양거야 디네디 와데 당지자게 붙어 무슨 말이 뭐 맞았어 아니 과외 잡아 당제리 머리 봐 다디 비게 텐데 동배 튼다디 마시나 사노마다나 카드이니 오타비게 때문에 라왕 초반 진데 그러봐 오타 된 진이 머리면 무슨 군에 톱서 오타 제자 베게 빼르치는 머리면 봐 머리 왜 가려서 문번능시 팀니 하마고체 내루 하마고체 하마고에서 랭해 봐 미샤고로 집에 미롱아 있는데 그 내가 전에 야가 제도 말아 봐 어디 능신체 랭 독자산도 산 그래서
so that it says tied by the tight bonds of karma, so hard to undo. Again, the meaning here is that we've created actions, we've created karma throughout lives, and that karma will definitely have an effect, definitely come back to us, and when it's ripe, when it ripens. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's not like the Buddhas, despite their huge amounts of love and compassion towards all living beings, they can't come along and stop that happening. They can't change the fact that we have to experience the results of our karma. So again, we're uncontrollably bound by that, by our karma. And then we're caught in the iron net of self-grasping. So what is the iron net of self-grasping? It's referring to holding on to things as being inherently existent. In other words, not understanding the presentation that of interdependent arising, that things are interdependent, and that there are no independent phenomena. There's no intrinsically existent phenomena. Rather, everything is interdependent. If you don't understand that, then it's like you're in darkness. You can't see clearly, and just as in darkness, to try and do something, to try and do work in darkness is almost impossible. In the same way, if you're bound, if you're in the darkness of ignorance, of not seeing things clearly, anything you do just doesn't work very well. It doesn't come out very well. So, as long as you're bound by that iron net of self-grasping, of holding on to truly existent self and phenomena, then you're always going to be caught up in samsara, in suffering like that.
Oh yeah, so, 몸이 세바기 깨버렸어. 몸이 어디 몸이 세바기 깨버렸어. 몸이 쓰나 무덤에 다 된데 조사네. 몸에 세바기 깨버렸어. 다디 그래서나 심지 깨버 토마매 그래. 니네 이제 요만 니네 말씀지 찬용 사매지. 토마매 바네 코바 토마매네 요. 다 추내로 마도비네 던던 라이레 코베 나다 코 대규레만도 제자 추내로 도빈 다 심지 조버다 되네. 추내로 동반이 통다 신소나 되네 코바 깨야 말아봤고 타르바사 통로로다 땡큐 대마도 신문에 타네 디면은 무매봐 시와 계신 깨바로 소다 된데스 코베 나는 무덤에 방에만 했게 탄데 된데스 대샤비나 기부 열어서 요 말 그래서나 코베 나는 동해 숨기 기제 매바나스 어또 코베 나리야 가시엘로 동해 송바 요래 동해 뉴베 동해체 되네 켜버 두지 동해스 다 작슈디야 켜버 두지 동해마도 매버시 커도 대 동해 되고 딩기베 동해다 동해사 요마디니 사제님은 풍부 예배 인자 아니 고다 동해야 단다 커도 대 문교 매비나고 나자 지단천 수분은 나자 유나 고 라만랑 시어로 디소 체제 동해냐야라 봐 문교 어제자 대선자 동해 숨부 가루고 만나게 지에 매비 인자 동해순 균제 매바나스 그뒤에 요랬음
So completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, of being in this darkness of not seeing things how they are, and then endlessly reborn into cyclic existence. So the word endlessly there, that particularly is pointing to the fact that this is not something that happens once. All of us, all living beings, all sentient beings have been born into samsara from beginningless time. There's no beginning to the time that we've been born again and again, uncontrollably into samsara like this. So endlessly we're born in cyclic existence. Of course, there won't be an end until one understands the nature of reality. Once one understands the nature of phenomena and the self, one understands the nature of reality and clears the darkness, then clears the ignorance from the mind, then there will be an end to being reborn again into samsara. Until you do that, then it's endless. Then until you achieve that, then it will be endless that one's reborn again and again. And while you're reborn again and again, then you will ceaselessly, in other words, without a break, be tormented by the three sufferings. So in general, not all sentient beings are always experiencing all three sufferings, but certain are. So if you look at these three sufferings, you have the suffering of suffering, obvious sufferings, the suffering of changeable sufferings, and then all-pervasive or all-encompassing suffering, the third one. And out of those three, the most essential one to understand is the third one, that of all-pervasive suffering or all-encompassing suffering. But again, as long as one's in cyclic existence, those one or all of those three types of sufferings will be one's experience.
This one, all this. All the negative dinner you money, Nanzus and some Japanese. Negative. That negative could lavina. Something negative. Quabe negative la tarante. The Matoconium. There's negative dinner. What dinner you age? Manam is what a shen, something tiki. Nanzusam. Nanzu. What comes to dinner? The Kangi did the same. Jeza digi big Tandala, big Tungena, Mr. Zabakini, Seveconeta. chanchucho samke gores sangye ko toba chi gores o toba zesu ja teta yang te mai ba che negap sa de neda ro de semchi ge neda ro de ngui bige neda ro tindi chi re sa neda o tindi bige de chenen de ge yore ta de che bi na zong ni zhu ja bi na rang ge neda ro de ta ga ba che ta rang yo ko tang no ta ba to gu du so xian ba mi ni zhe mi ni shen so ta neda de song yin za So then
the end of it said, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So, as we've just been saying, that if one's uncontrollably bound into the sufferings of samsara, then that's a condition, that's a state that one finds oneself in, and that all living beings are in. So recognizing that, and recognizing that in fact it's one's mothers, it's living beings that have been your mother before, that have been close to you, that are in such a state, that are experiencing the condition of being bound within samsara. On the basis of that, on the basis of recognizing that one's mothers are in that condition, then you can generate the supreme mind of it. Then one should generate the supreme mind of enlightenment, because if you recognize these are my mothers, they're going through the sufferings as we've discussed before. That's where they are. That's the condition that they're in. Then on the basis of that, you should generate the mind of supreme enlightenment or bodhicitta.
Ma ta gomore ko karesana ngoy nezu bige samtane jana gomne ane gombasedo gomne dichana sam gyuba dugurela di chanju samagi tame chayo oda 자원이 samagi tame bige kasore desong yinza ane ma gombo ta tuzu tanda tuzu janyo marwa ma to shinda gombo di gombo ma dilis kama ni sumle mene gombe ina do gomshana ane nima jigo ni gon kanda dichana So, with what we've been discussing here about this, the mind of enlightenment, all these other things, but particularly here this bodhicitta or the mind of enlightenment, the way that we transfer this from just being words to being understanding in our minds is through this concept of meditating or familiarizing yourself. What's really important is not just to leave it at words, but is actually to use this understanding and to contemplate or meditate it. And even if you don't have much time, but if you can spend a few minutes a day meditating or thinking about this subject, if you can think of a few minutes of trying to generate this mind of bodhicitta, then it's absolutely certain that the mind of bodhicitta will arise. The nature of cause and effect being what it is, if you do the correct causes, the results will come about. So it's certain that if you do contemplate and meditate on this mind, then at some point you will achieve the mind of bodhicitta. But it's very important to contemplate, to meditate on this mind.
Yeah, what is it? That Delia, so Tungin Natan de Sondua, 7 years simple singing. Tungin Naval meaning could get a letter of huge. Tungin 9 years simple meaning Kioraba. Timado, Devat, you get the Tato Gang, Ninji position. Chazan, Tandandi, we need to check Tungin Tiki Sunkore. Chazan, or this one, 7 years to get Lelayo, Shirak Lelayo. Oh, Chazan did this one, the D Ma to speak with China. And go Shirak, never chamber Shirak, never chamber Shirak.
the best way to generate this mind, the essence of generating this mind, of how to generate it, is to think about suffering. Thinking about the suffering of yourself and the suffering of others. That's the cause. That's the reason. That's what brings this mind up. It's obviously not going to help. It doesn't generate this mind if you start to think about the happiness of others and the good things and the positive things from samsara. It's not going to help to generate this mind. What generates this mind of bodhicitta is to particularly focus on the sufferings that oneself and other living beings are going through.
Oh yeah, 어떻잖아. 다다다 정주성게 편인 비지 말람 지금 편인 비지라고. 그래서는 정주성사디 준주나 송반시 정주성게 교는 계지기 과배 전라 담배 냠다나 대신에 세 주신신 지들 함이제 찾아 교를 송거래. 제가 정주성사디 단도 전에 곰니 아니 깨버다가 정주성게 교는 계지기스 깨지 담아라 대가라 안라야. 과배 전라 담배 냠도 과배나 동이 냥대기 냠탁배 어sem지 순듯이네 냠다 타가나 디밍리야 민기찬에 개세 정주성버서 개세에서 정주성배 명래 개세스 민기찬에 뒤도그랬어 더영게 찬에 제비나 지딜 함이 제비 차여유 지딜 하든 미드 제비 차자유 오늘 탄에 되게 문제 차요 어디 손자 더영게 찬에 자점 싫어 차 민기찬에 된데 자점 차 제자 디차이니도 그래서 정주성 단다 두 곰니 깨다가 깨지지게 깨다라는 데 차버서
So it's said to be incredibly beneficial to be able to generate this mind of bodhicitta. In the Shantideva's Bodhisattva way of life, he talks about as soon as you, even for one moment, arise the thought of bodhicitta in your mind, in that very moment you become called a son of the victors, a son of the Buddhas, and in that moment that you generate the a mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta, not only by name but by meaning, you become a son of the Buddhas. So by name you become like what we call in the world a ruler or a king. You receive this name as being a prince or a son of the victors. But also in meaning, also you become somebody who is enormously beneficial to others and enormously beneficial to the world. So both in name and meaning, as soon as you generate this bodhicitta or this thought in your mind, then you become such a person like that.
예, 근데 제 편심 버려. 제가 대송으로 디고 dob진 신도 미세봐. 미세 잖아요. 빨아대는 지고 첨보다. 빨아대는 지고 첨보다. 간된 위기 조여 될 바지는 지마된 송도와. 제가 디고 접 첨보. 센다가 사매는 개방만 dob진 시사는 티라킹이디 정주성 뭐 라키고요. 파 세기는 디베디고 동에 매버서 샤오디 대장 비게 가서래 란제다 드라마 비게 세고 좀 세고대 말다 거의 고이를 줄봐 경 라키 말봐 딱 간다 톱첨부 그저 주위는 라키인데 그래서나 디고 톱첨부 랑제는 유비네 라키인데 정주성 사들 라키고 정주성들 깨버다가 아니 디고야 코랑케 디케보다 디고 매버서 코랑케 매버서 초라버지 먼저 고야 초라버지 서버에 손 소리 있어 어디 코랑 사이 그래서 제가 어떻게 버진나 미지미데 손 당문에 차네 손던기 용게 문에 딘데기다 디버 사이 문에 딘데 딱 버가서 다 손대지네 디 지마데 인심이 된 거였어 저주쌤도 깨버렸어
So again, generating, if you're able to generate this mind of bodhicitta, you're able to generate this thought, this mind of enlightenment, then it has the capacity that once you've done so, that you can accumulate enormous amount of merit. Every moment that you have this mind of enlightenment in you, huge amounts of merit is created. And not only that, again it's said in the Bodhisattva's way of life that just one moment of generating bodhicitta can purify enormous amounts of negative karma. So on both sides, in terms of the accumulation of the merit that one requires to become a Buddha, bodhicitta is the cause of doing that. And in terms of purifying what needs to be purified in order to become enlightened, again, it's bodhicitta that has the enormous capacity to do this more than anything else. The benefits, the advantages of having this mind are that the accumulation of merit is enormous, is much, much greater than without the mind. And also the purification. Even the greatest, even the worst sorts of negative karmas can be instantly purified with this mind of bodhicitta.
어떠잖아. 다 지금 뭐 겁나 삼지도 고면 뒤주 민도 다 비게 뒤주 대선도 차송. 세상다 다 샤기 아니 다 샤기 다 세상 상이 양답에 따바로 봐. 그 개정 뭐 싫어래. 세상 대선자 아니 드린레 대선 같이 야 땅도 그래. 주주 쳐서자. 맞지. 매상이 대선나 마도시야 곧 누구면도 하게.
So Rinpoche was hoping to do a little bit of meditation on bodhicitta, but we've run out of time already. So we'll leave it there today. But tomorrow the subject we're doing is the right view, or the view of emptiness, which is really very important. So we were planning to start at what time?
10:30.
So Rinpoche is suggesting we could start half an hour earlier. Can we start at 10 o'clock? Yeah.
오케이. 주변에서는 주지 중이 제거선 된 데서는 돌아. 어디야 보여 사래. 어떠잖아. 다디야고도. 다디 손자 견난조 다 단다 데 주주 중마송. 이내 소소 샤나라. 어다 까마 가시면은 곰나쇼 마 니중다 전주섬사도 곰베이나 아니 지금 단다 가사지 암조 걸어라 봐. 아 견난조 망부진데 주저로 닝거래. 하고니를 봐. 그래서 곰베이나 쉽지 당문에 단 편유 첨벌에 편도 첨벌에 밀릴리메 고요천도 다.
So again, we haven't had time to do some meditation on these subjects here and now, but that doesn't mean you're let off. You should go to your rooms and you should try and spend a few minutes meditating and contemplating these two subjects of renunciation and bodhicitta, because that's what makes life meaningful, is sitting down and contemplating and meditating on these subjects.
Okay. So
we have a few minutes for a couple of questions.
Yeah, I have a small question. When someone attains enlightenment, presumably they no longer have bodhicitta because they no longer have the intention to become enlightened. But what does that bodhicitta that they've had in the continuum of being a bodhisattva when they attain complete enlightenment, does that bodhicitta then change into something else, or does it completely disappear?
상계산이라 상계산에다 전주심 톱사라 전주심 전국 사진에서만 전주 톱사라
되죠.
전주 톱사 인산에 전주심 매워자래 말이스
야마르미 되니 가에 두르미 전주심 요 상계살라 전주심 다 내부도 살바 전주심 용서고요 니지심도 용서고요.
When you're enlightened, you don't stop having the mind of bodhicitta. You still have bodhicitta in your mind.
Okay.
But it's no longer the intention?
그냥 상계기 가사. 강하다. 상계산에는 상계 그거 뭐라. 그래서 상계 토하기 도요 뭐라. 도나요 뭐라. 상계.
도나요 맞아. 상계 톱선 내부터 살바. 전주심 저번 인지 전부. 대권의 라네 안 전주심 톱살바. 전주심 그 비게 대권내다 비게 상계 고만 톱살바. 톱산에 전주심 용做不了的。 됐음 대 상보다 들 상가죠만 대 매차예요 막 니지 전부 용서고요 참바 용서고요 대요 쌤 대요
매차만 이년 제가 나서 자주 생기 도번이 되라 도번이 된 디나를 직직도 상계기도 도나라 디 상계산에 디 가지라 도난데
대요 다 전주쌤 사죠 봐 딩일에 때네 전주쌤 깨고 봐 규팅일 때네 자바 니지 전부 다 어느 상계 란티 심지 탐지도 어느 비게 상계고만 토반 되게 탐지죠 봐. 토반 돼 봐. 될 때네 정주섬 사태. 고 정주섬 레스기요 마다. tela teni chanju sam sa ke ora sangye bige to ande na sangye top sa ne chanju sam yo ra kunyo chanju sam sa di yo dan da chanju sam ni ga
No. The way to think about it is that when we're talking about what bodhicitta really is, we've said that it has two parts to it, that the path of wishing to become a Buddha and the path of wanting to do that for the benefit of all living beings. Those two wishes which create bodhicitta, in a sense, we have to think of them as being things which bring about the generation of bodhicitta. But bodhicitta itself is something which comes about on the basis of those two things. So even once you've achieved those things, you still have bodhicitta in the mind.
okay
Can you repeat the question in English?
The question was basically what happens to the mind of bodhicitta once you're actually a Buddha, because obviously bodhicitta is the wish to become a Buddha. So does a Buddha still have that mind? And if so, if not, what happens to it?
So if you're already a Buddha, what's the point in wishing to become a Buddha?
Yeah. Well, ask.
Sangi tobda yes. Okay, amara.
그래
Dimena. Okay, amara.
그래 맞대 야야 도대체 다 집어 가야 되냐
Speak up real fast. Yeah.
So, just a question on renunciation. Can the mind of renunciation still enjoy things? So, well, you say it does not seek enjoyment any longer from any samsaric pleasures. So, can it still? Does it still enjoy
So
life?
nature said you. Nature de chirangi kola mignate kola mi deola dono yomara. Nature yesang. Tachiran soso gira nature kesane. Any koa you mean enjoyments in samsara or just enjoyments at all?
Well, I mean, if it's probably still in samsara. isn't it?
Just soso gira nature kesane. Dewa yona mena. Soso gira dewa yona mena.
대버스나
Dewa giwa.
아 민주계 차서나 코베나 덴드잖아요 말봐 되는 비게 가르스나 코발레 탐도 들어봐 되는 가르스나 탈바 된도 얘기를마도 엔베 코베나 되게 말봐 다 되지 지금 말봐 배나 중앙 강의 십지 서지 나리야 중앙 교통 강의 통네 디네 근데 동고인 삼삼배 탑신 남 디간다 땅네 간다 동거를마도 되게 말봐 어디 낭신 인중계 차서나 코바 되지 지금 말 되게 말해 가르스는 코발레 통해 알다 탑 가르도 코베라 코바 대과대 컨디 차도스나 코베 자와 등지 말이 버생이 코메서 등지 말이 코메바 가르서 올선다 최근 내로도비 단다 딘중서래 딘중 동배 통다 디 공거 디 공네 어디 공마다 되는 코바 걸리슈 로로 원터잖아 되래
I'm not getting the right answer because I didn't ask the question right, but basically, no. Once you've developed renunciation, then you've developed renunciation towards all the things of samsara. So certainly as far as samsaric pleasures are concerned, then you wouldn't experience samsaric, you wouldn't see those samsaric pleasures as something you want, because what you want to do is free yourself from samsara. So that involves freeing yourself from all of the pleasures within samsara. 근데 지난 내중 계산으로 소소규라 아니 소소 콜라 내이나 콜라 기부유나 소소기 셈라 기부유나 메나데 그런 기대
코발레 기우촌에 아마 다 가서 코발레 시험가 통사로
콜라 미니 기울 라메 지단기 소소규라
sense 기우야 아마 채테텐데 소소기 기우촌에 아마 코바싱에 테나 원네 타네 강에 봐 통사로
not towards the things of samsara, no. You would never have in pleasure in those, no.
실수는 잘다 코바싱에 테면서 원네 okay
When he spoke about like keeping yourself in the lowest position,
Uh-huh.
and at the same time the need to rejoice in one's own actions. How do you reconcile those two?
Getting this one's I don't know, Namchun Chegora, so Yundin Yoma, but Jeremshe Nashi, Yundin Mambu Yunan, so Namchun Chegora, Namchun Chegora. That did on Sosoki Yundin Yobala, Jesu Yang, Yabu Yoda, so the Yundin Yaba didn't kind of, see there.
Jesu Yan Jadi, that Piggy Sosu Yundan, Tagana, she Sosu Gabachev, Shanla Pandocha, Condition. Oh, didn't they charge on something? Kawakwan, the Iran, just Iran. Oh, that Tandati Casatana can deal a word. Mount Yum Che, Casore. King Jung side of King Jung. Oh, King Jung Jadi, in Shimish Quarry. King Jung, Machena, can but to do some betting on a tranecta. Nage, Nage, Lobeck King, bet. Die Kasa, die China Tungjia, Nungjun Dias Doa, or can but Margediana, Koti Yungre. The Maya Chedo, and Shenlia Piggy Casore. Magema Chepche, Shengi Yundenta to Tong Shen of Quishache. This is Shengi Yunde condition to Ram Jadata. A Ram Shen, what did you quarter? Timado, Tian Kaga.
There are different types of mind. The one which is rejoicing in your own qualities is looking at virtuous things or good things that you've done and appreciating those good things. The other one, where you're trying to see yourself as lower or humble towards others, is recognizing that if you're proud, if you think yourself as better than others, that you have more, that you're superior to others, that's a negative type of mind. So this aspect of trying to see yourself as lower or not have that pride is all to do with not seeing yourself as superior or above others. Whereas when you're looking at your own good qualities, you're not looking at it in terms of being better than others. You're simply rejoicing in the fact that you have those qualities. So they're different types of mind.
Okay. Oh yeah. Big it to was.
Putting it on.
That Sangesanara, Sangesane, Rangi Sem Kautovre, that's so Tiva Dirisha. Sem Yamane call Anglo, call Chilo, Yamane Sukam, Sukmekam, Simakone, Sangesane.
Tadi Chidan Sanga Kadul, Taba Savasung, Sinan and Kuna Savasung Mare, Yine Tanga Shugida. Manzu Semtelia, the Wang Xie da Yixi Nidua. Wang Xie singing that Manzu Subundella, Ben ready or that dirty. The Yixi Sandela, Yigi Shevajoro, Yigi Shevatelia, any Pigekasa, the Ragbata Tamuslam, Ragbata Tamu, Ragbasana, any Pigan Namdog, Gyung, Itakanda, or that Pigekasore. Or Gyung and dating it, tell us some Ragwa cigarette. Sem Ragwa. Sem Ragwache. That dine that under Mazu Sem di Yore, Sem Ragwache, Dele Tabache, Shindu Tabache Yore. Yore di Tanda Ragwati one Chidar Church. Any Piggy Casa. That good in this, that Piggy Lang, Basad, Le, Takadasa, Chigorba. That Sem Tramote Mondu Guyala, Namgu, Nig Negolia, not needs to go to check out Shidegoma. One she can go back, girl, some time you can go to wear. Da or di Nanshinche, that in a cinema show. Or Yamne Cheni, 아니 심 탑시 탑다 동번니다 아니 비게 탑 켜바신요 될 때는 심 잡아티게 마까 탑 켜바신 거는 심 잡아티게 망가야 다디 카 숨도 쉬어 다른 게 죽음에 지다 상계서를 디체는 나주기 심 참어 줘라 심 참어 딩모도 그 뒤에는 신도 타바티 아니 융매외세스 그래 융매외세스 당아주디 깨리야 융매외세스 다 길게라 융매외세 딩융매외세 당뭐 터만이네 여바치 상계서는 돈이 융매외세 디셈디 가래서나 아니 교연 잡아내 맹게 맞아 난가를 지는 난가를 띵바다 지유도 고티 여봐 당여 말봐 오다 간가 당서나 당마시 여봐 교연사는 어디 능시 셈 현다 똑같은데 해마 슈퍼 셈 신도 참 뭐요 어디 셈디 말은지 규를 요래 상계선 셈라고 간가 바가 다또 독신료 뭐래 딩용은 되게 매바샤 셈 잡아 교연이 어떻게 매바찬 디콩은 교수나 셈디 융매외센디 아니 가서 와래 대회 켜봤어 대동이면서 대회 배팅은 대회 켜봐 다가나시 셈디 아니 배유 떠야 제비는 오다 나바탐식이 있었어 상계사지 남기 강갑 켄통이 수준 먼저 저번에 가던데 통문도 와리 그 미가자네 그 그게 하고만 와 딘데 많이 봐 어때 유용조바 켄통이 배트 어디지 대바타 언비게 대체 세르는 님은 몸샤는 딱 간다 그 딘데체 딘데지게 셈디 어디 융매외서 등원도 교수나 어딜 상계서 상계게 투디 남긴사 딘데체래 어디건도 교네 셈디 다른 아주 다 지단 오래 다 딘데 등원도 교네 아니 디가네 다 셈지 되는 제발라 셈지 그데 되는 제보다 간거 키엔기 말고 뭐네 켐바래 대선자 안 셈지 되는 제발 상계 크도리야 셈지 다 배대 나라도 지긴 대신 좀블린 대신 셈지 나면 망고 싶어요 봐 니나래 대마전 지긴 컴 배대 당내 대와 마다고 지긴 하죠 당내 대와요 또 셈지 타예 버려 난거냐 봐 지긴 망고 되게 셈지 되는 제발라 군주 컴다면서 삼바도 남사 크도다 남아 그래 땡구고요네 상계 땡구고요네다 하는 장주선 배추된 가리는 코 딱딱거나 된다 나네 디가사 구순 담면다 땡 이담라 카시 이담라 땡거라 이담 그 남아 가리 땡구고요네 어때는 심지게 되는지 구베 팀부만 볼람사는 또 구두 숭주스 구다 툭 숭주다 먼저 이는 심지는 류의 셈스가 류심 이름이 먼저 류의 셈 백화가라 셈레사 류글리기야 말아 딘데 많이 배치 딘데치 디토라 온데토 잔티레
So to give a proper answer to that, then it really depends upon the more complicated parts of tantric teachings. But to try and answer your question there, when we think about mind or consciousness, then there are different aspects or parts of consciousness. We can talk about sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness first of all. And obviously, from that point of view, the sense consciousnesses depend upon a body. You have to have a body in order to function, to use sense consciousnesses, whereas mental consciousness doesn't necessarily. And then within what we think of as mental consciousness, we have the more grosser levels of mental consciousness, which generally we talk about as being the more deluded or more the less clear aspects of consciousness, because when we're talking about afflictions and where those go on, it's within the gross type of consciousness that those exist. But below that grosser consciousness, there's what we call a subtle consciousness, and even more subtle than that was what we call a very subtle consciousness. I think sometimes the word substrate consciousness is used for that level of consciousness, because it's the one that's always there, and it's, for example, when you go to sleep and your sense consciousness don't function anymore, then in fact the subtle consciousness, not even the gross mental consciousness is active, only the subtle consciousness is active. So that subtle consciousness is said to be clear by nature, and if you go to the very subtle consciousness, we'll say that is, like the example of the sky and the clouds, that all the afflictions and so forth reside in the grosser levels of mind. And once you get down to the very subtle consciousness, afflictions don't abide there, they don't exist there, and that's known as the sort of clear light of mind, the clear nature of mind. Now, when you're not enlightened, when you're as we are, then obviously your mind and body are depend upon each other, and therefore your senses obviously depend upon your sense consciousness depends upon the body. But then once you are enlightened, once you become a Buddha, then you've activated this very subtle level of mind. That's all that's there is the subtle mind of clear light, and that can function in a different way from an unenlightened person's mind. Why? Because when we think about things, or when we use our mind, we're restricted because of the way our minds are and our afflictions. We can look at a wall, but we can't see through the wall what's on the other side of the wall, and we can think about somewhere else where we're not actually somewhere else to where we are at the moment, but we can't actually just sort of be there. We can't actually go there. Whereas once you've activated this very subtle mind, once you've reached Buddhahood, then it's said that it's almost like there's a mixing of mind and body, and that the subtle consciousness combines with the subtle body, and therefore with that subtle mind, a Buddha can go anywhere. A Buddha can manifest anywhere, and in fact, because a Buddha functions purely on the basis of love and compassion and wishing to benefit others, then a Buddha will go anywhere that's needed, anywhere that a Buddha can go to benefit sentient beings. So this is how you get, emanations of Buddhas, or how you get Buddhas appearing as deities and so forth. They're not restricted by a physical body. They now exist on the level of very subtle consciousness, and that very subtle consciousness can manifest in whichever way is needed. So we talk about it being the combination, in the sense of body and mind with the Buddha's mind, that mind can show itself where it's needed, in whichever way it's needed to be shown, whichever way is needed by living beings, and that mind is unrestricted, so it's omniscient. How is it omniscient? Because there's no restrictions to knowing anything. It's not that it has to go around and know everything individually. It's that the nature of that mind is such that there are no obstructions to knowing anything, so therefore it's omniscient about everything. And being omniscient about anything also means that wherever it wants to be, it can. Wherever it needs to be, it will be. And also we talk about it encompassing everywhere, that the Buddha's mind is all pervasive, that it encompasses everywhere. Because if it knows everything, it is the same thing really as saying that it is everywhere, it exists everywhere. So, yeah.
됐네. 오야 어떠잖아. 그렇지. 딱한다 데리. 길레메 거도 셈나 셈마치디 셈기랑 시 회스타 없어도. 어당 알아서 비게 셈기랑 신디 아니 뇽마다 배 가서 교회 싸우는 명기 셈 딱한다 뇽매 회세세래. 근데 심지 탐지 교를 요하래. 제가 여배 인상 아니 상계에서 신다면 소수 교등 것도 교수나 거다 상계에서 나가래 돼요. 제가 대송 인자 니 이지다 매번난 거래. 소수교 싸심 문에 전에 딘티신도 수요는 요하래. 제가 심지에도 신경을 말아 봐. 랑교 싸심부터 샤네. 그 신경을 말아. 제가 딘티지 요바 이지다 매번나 딩엘 가르고 그러면 투모 남장고. 투모 남장 가서 니좀 장선야도 또 단단히 쉬어야지 봐. 니 녀마터네. 해놓고 비게 가서 다 단도 지고 딩아 계절 상아 계절 봐. 심 차라다니 고민하듯어. 데이터 쉬고야. 레다 canzu디 카지 긴게 유게리 마찬가지네. 쉬고야 되잖아. 내가 가서 니주 장선야도 봐. 비게 그 맞잖아. 투모 남자 사면은 현다 연구요.
So as it says in the Gyulama, the Sublime Continuum, that the mind, mind is not bound by itself. This is not a very good translation, I apologize, but the mind is not bound by itself, but the mind is by nature pure. The meaning, though, is that our minds, although are not sort of the afflictions which we have in our minds, are not actually in the nature of the mind. That our mental afflictions and delusions and so forth, that which binds us to samsara, are not part of the actual subtle nature of our minds. And in fact, if you can get to down into the subtle nature, or the very subtle nature of mind, then it's actually pure. That it's clear of all those afflictions. And by nature, and this is what we mean again by Buddha nature, the fact that we have within us the seed of being a Buddha. So we say, therefore, that the very subtle mind like that is not afflicted, it's not bound by afflictions, and it's not bound by the things that gross mind is bound by. However, this whole presentation, again, is really more related and more understood through the tantric teachings, which some of you may be familiar with and some may not. But even whether you are or not, the reality of understanding things through the method of Tantra and reaching this understanding of the subtle mind and the very subtle mind depends upon training in the normal path, in the path which leads to that. And therefore, whether you're ready or not to look at the tantric teachings, you still need to base your practice on what we're talking about here, which is the 3 principles of the path. Because if you don't have those as your basis, then it's impossible to go any deeper or any further. So, yes, this is a thing you should think about, and it is inspiring. It's a very useful inspiration to one's practice, to the fact that one does have the seed of Buddhahood, that one's mind by nature is actually unafflicted, is a very inspirational thing to think about. But that doesn't mean that it negates the need to think about the 3 principles of the path, because to get to that point, you need to use the 3 principles of the path.
Neyandaya me chanju semjo rinpoche mage banam ge yuru geba nyamba mewa yang kone kong pebara sho tongi tawa rinpoche mage banam ge yuru geba nyamba mewa yang kone kong pebara sho kanre rave kwarve shingamde pendan dewa malu jume ne jenre sewa tenzi gyazu 샤베 시대 파도 땡교로 제 어떻게잖아. 다다샤샤.